For those of you who don't realize or maybe believe that the left, the progressive left, have a dynamic, very, very cogent plan, a constructive, if you will, in a destructive way, playbook for financial and economical terrorism in America, you need to listen to Stephen Lerner in this audio and his plan to disrupt, to destroy capitalism as we know it. Stephen Lerner is a former SEIU executive, and he spells it all out. Listen.
We're going to hear from Steve Lerner next from SEIU, the architect of the Justice for Janitors campaign. Currently, he's working on partnering with unions and groups in Europe and South America to build a campaign to hold financial institutions accountable.
It seems to me that we're in a moment where we need to figure out in a much more direct action, much more concrete way, how we really are trying to disrupt and create uncertainty for capital, for how corporations operate. And it may sound like that's a crazy thing, in a moment of weakness we could do it, but the thing about a boom and bust economy is it's actually incredibly fragile, because it's not based on real wealth. It's based on gambling and all of that. And so there are actually extraordinary things that we could do right now that would start to destabilize the folks that are in power and start to rebuild their movement. And for example, 10% of homeowners, going back to where you started, who are a quarter of all people who own a home are underwater, right? Their home is worth, they're paying more for it than it's worth. 10% of those people are now in strategic default, meaning they're refusing to pay, but they're staying in their home. That's totally spontaneous, right? They figured out it takes a year to kick me out of my home because more foreclosures backed up. I'm going to stay, I won't pay. It's just what business does. It's a good business decision. If you could double that number, you would make put banks on the edge of insolvency again. And so the question would be, what would happen if we could organize homeowners en masse to do a mortgage structure? To say, if we get 500,000 people to agree, we'll agree we won't pay our mortgages. It would literally cause a new financial crisis. 4 things we could do that could really upset Wall Street. One is if city and state and other government entities demanded to renegotiate their debt because they're paying too much interest. And you might say, well, why would the banks ever do it? Because cities and counties could say, we won't do business in the future with you if you don't renegotiate the debt now, meaning about a third of bank profits generate from dealing with cities and states. So we could leverage the power we have of government to say, we won't do business with you, JP Morgan Chase, anymore, unless you do 2 things. You reduce the price of our interest, since your interest rate is down, and second, you rewrite the mortgages for everybody in the community so they can stay in their home. We can make them do that. The second thing is, there's a whole question in Europe now about austerity and students raising the question of a debt structure. What would happen if students said, we're not going to pay? It's $1 trillion. Think about the Republicans screaming about debt, $1 trillion in student debt. There's a third thing that we could think about. What if public employee unions, instead of just being on the defensive, put on the collective bargaining table? When they negotiate, they said, we demand, as a condition of negotiation, that the government renegotiate. We believe in good financial management. It's crazy that you're paying too much interest to your buddy, the bankers. It's a strike issue for us. We will strike unless you force the banks to relieve the debt of the city. I'm not going to go through all the detail except to say there's extraordinary things we do, and then if you add on top of that, if we really thought about moving to the kind of disruption in Madison, but moving that to Wall Street and moving that to other cities around the country where we basically said, you stole $17 trillion, you've impoverished us, and we're going to make it impossible for you to operate. Labor can't lead it. We're a critical part of it. We do have money. We have millions of members who are furious. But I don't think this kind of movement can happen unless actually community groups and other actors take the lead. And that's a big reversal of how a lot of these coalition things have been thought about. It's sort of unions helping community groups, or community groups helping us narrowly. And if we really believe that we're in a transformative stage of what's happening in capitalism, and we either need to confront it in a serious way and develop a real ability to put a boot in the wheel, then I think we have to think not about labor community alliances. We have to think about how together we're building something that really has the capacity to disrupt how the system operates. And so I guess raise that we need to think about a whole new way of thinking about it, which is not as a partnership, but building something new, because the bottom line is, as soon as a union gets sued, it's going to be terrifying. When we get an injunction that says, you know, the union backs down. So we need to build a movement based on we know the repression we're going to face. And I think the only way we can do that is to think much more creatively. And the key thing I sort of throw out is we have to say, what does the other side fear most? They fear disruption. They fear uncertainty. Every article about Europe says they rioted in Greece, the markets went down. The folks that control this country care about one thing: how the stock market does, how the bond market does, and what the bonuses is. So I think we need to have a very simple strategy. How do we bring down the stock market? How do we bring down their bonuses? How do we interfere with their ability to be rich? And if we don't do, and that means we have to politically isolate them, economically isolate them, and disrupt them. So it's not all theory, I'll do a pitch. So a bunch of us around the country think about who would be a really good company to hate. We decided that would be JP Chase, based here in New York. And so we're going to roll out over the next couple months what will hopefully be an exciting campaign about JP Chase that is really about challenge the power of Wall Street. And so what we're looking at is in the first week of May, can we get enough people together, we're starting now, to really have a week of action in New York with a goal of vote. I don't want to give any details because I don't know which police agents are in the room. But the goal would be that we would roll out in New York the first week in May. That we would connect three ideas. That we're not broke, there's plenty of money. They have the money, we need to get it back. And that they're using Bloomberg and other people in government as the vehicle to try to destroy us. And so that we need to take on those both at the same time. And that we'll start here, we're going to look at a week of civil disobedience, direct action, all over the city, then roll into the JP shareholder meeting, which is they moved out of New York because they were afraid, I guess, to Columbus, where there's going to be a 10-state mobilization to try to shut down that meeting, and then looking at bank shareholder meetings around the country, and trying to create some moments like Madison, except where we're on offense instead of defense, where we have brave and heroic battles challenging the power of the giant corporations that we hope will sort of inspire a much bigger movement about redistributing wealth and power in the country.
You're talking about why unions are so invested because of their pension plans and why ungovernability, as Francis Fox Pittman and Cloward taught us, you know, poor people's movements are successful when they create conditions of ungovernability, and then you win victories.
PBN, for news that affects America. Join us on our live show at pushbacknow.com.